Some of the jurors cried, just tears ran down their cheeks.
This is a crime so disturbing that even the jurors cried. It became one of the worst double family massacres to happen in less than a week, starting on a day meant for joy and celebration. January 1st, 2006, a Sunday afternoon in Richmond, Virginia. Firefighters were called to 3119 North Chesterfield Avenue, expecting a normal kitchen fire. But what they discovered in the basement was anything but normal. 4 bodies, a mother, a father, and their 2 young daughters, just 9 and 4 years old. The fire did not take their lives. Someone else did. The flames were set afterward, meant to hide the truth. Less than 48 hours later, another nightmare surfaced. A second family, killed in the same way. 3 more victims, tied up, tortured, and murdered inside their own home. And that left 2 haunting questions. Who killed these 2 families, and why? Brian Tabo Harvey, 49, was a Richmond music legend. In the 1980s, he fronted the indie band House of Freaks, known for raw, emotional performances. Even after the band dissolved, his friendship with drummer Johnny Hott remained strong. On New Year's Eve 2005, Brian played his final show. By 2006, Brian worked on computers for the Henrico County school system while keeping music alive in his spare time. On a fan website, he once wrote, "I think I've come pretty close to knowing why I'm here on Earth since my daughter was born. I think you have to be hopeful about life when you have a child. You owe it to them." His wife, 39-year-old Catherine Grabinski, known as Kathy, co-owned World of Mirth, a beloved toy store in Richmond's Carytown district. She designed it as a refuge, free from violent toys. No guns, no swords, just imagination and creativity. Her brother, actor Stephen Culp, later testified, "She wanted to create a space where parents could come with their kids and spend time. It's a wonderful place." Kathy was also an artist who painted theater sets, worked as a pastry chef, and devoted herself to her community. Brian and Kathy met in 1990 at the Border Cafe where she worked. They married that year, and House of Freaks released a song dedicated to her, "I Got Happy." Their first daughter, Stella Ann, was born in 1996. Teachers described her as exceptionally bright and kind. Their second daughter, Ruby May, arrived in 2001, full of energy and laughter. The family lived in a 2-story red brick house in Woodland Heights, a neighborhood with tree-lined streets and front porch swings. They had converted their basement into a cozy family room filled with toys, instruments, and art supplies. The Harveys were deeply woven into Richmond's community. They had no enemies, no financial troubles, no conflicts. They were simply a family living a good life. Every New Year's Day, the Harveys hosted a barbecue, a tradition that brought friends and family together. On Sunday morning, January 1st, 2006, they woke early to prepare. Kathy baked chocolate chip cookies while Ruby played nearby. Stella had spent the night at a friend's house and would return mid-morning. Around 10 o'clock, Brian stepped outside to grab the newspaper. Distracted by the front page, he walked back inside and left the door unlocked, a common habit on party days so guests could let themselves in. But 2 men had been watching the house. When they saw that unlocked door, they saw an opportunity. Kathy was in the kitchen checking on cookies when she heard unfamiliar voices in the living room. Assuming someone had arrived early, she walked in and froze. 2 strangers stood in her home. The man in charge, later identified as 29-year-old Ricky Javon Gray, ordered Kathy, Brian, and Ruby downstairs to the basement. His tone left no room for argument. Brian took Ruby's hand and led her down to the playroom, with Kathy following. Gray and his accomplice, 29-year-old Ray Joseph Dandridge, used electrical cords and packing tape to bind the family's hands and feet. Gray told them not to worry. He said if they cooperated, no one would get hurt. They just needed money. Then they'd leave. The two men ransacked the house, finding a laptop, DVD player, electronics, and jewelry. Eventually, around 10 o'clock, someone knocked on the front door. Gray went to the basement, untied Kathy's hands, and told her to answer it. But first, he leaned close and warned, "If you try to get help, your husband and daughter will die." Kathy opened the door to find Karen Perkinson, the mother of Stella's friend. Stella had just returned from her sleepover and immediately darted past her mother, heading for the basement playroom where the family usually gathered. Kathy intercepted Stella's friend before she could follow. Perkinson later said Kathy seemed tense and distracted, completely unlike her usual warm self. When asked if she was okay, Kathy claimed she wasn't feeling well. Then she made a strange circular motion with her hand near her temple, as if mimicking a gun. Perkinson interpreted it as someone being crazy. Then Kathy shut the door and went back inside. That gesture haunted Perkinson for years. Was Kathy trying to signal danger? Could she have escaped but chose to return because Ruby and Brian were still downstairs, bound and helpless? We'll never know. But Kathy went back into that house, knowing what waited for her, because she couldn't leave her family behind. With all 4 family members in the basement, Gray grew agitated. Time was running out. Guests would arrive soon. According to Dandridge's later testimony, Gray pulled out a knife from the Harveys' kitchen and attacked the family. When they didn't die quickly enough, he grabbed a claw hammer and struck them repeatedly. Dandridge claimed Gray ordered him to help, but he refused. He also admitted he did nothing to stop Gray or help the family escape. When it was over, Gray removed Kathy's wedding ring. He poured wine over the bodies and set the room on fire to destroy evidence. On their way out, the men stopped in the kitchen and ate the cookies Kathy had been baking that morning. Then they climbed into a car where Ashley Baskerville Tucker, Dandridge's 21-year-old girlfriend, was waiting as lookout. She had no idea what had just happened inside. Then they drove away into the quiet Sunday morning. Around 1:30 that afternoon, Johnny Hott arrived for the barbecue. The front door stood open, but thick smoke poured out. He called for Brian and Kathy, but got no response. He ran to a neighbor's house and told them to call 911. Firefighters extinguished the blaze and found 4 bodies in the basement playroom. The medical examiner determined that Brian and Kathy died from blunt force trauma to the head. Ruby died from stab wounds to her neck and back. Stella died from blunt force trauma and smoke inhalation, meaning she was still alive when the fire started. First responders were devastated. Some wept openly. The realization that the parents had watched their children die and the children had witnessed their parents' attack was too much even for experienced officers. This wasn't just murder. It was the annihilation of an innocent family. In the hours immediately following the discovery of the Harvey family's bodies, investigators faced a nightmare scenario. They had virtually nothing to work with. The fire, while quickly extinguished, had still done significant damage to the crime scene. Potential DNA evidence had been compromised by heat and smoke. Fingerprints that might have been lifted from surfaces were obscured or destroyed. The basement where the family had been murdered was now a contaminated scene where separating usable evidence from fire damage became an agonizing process. Detective Mike Ricketts, assigned as lead investigator, later described walking through that basement as one of the most difficult moments of his career. Not just because of what he saw, but because of what he didn't see. Clear evidence pointing to a suspect. There were no witnesses. Not a single neighbor had seen anyone entering or leaving the Harvey home during the critical window between 10 in the morning and 1:30 in the afternoon. No surveillance cameras in the area had captured anything useful. The Woodland Heights neighborhood, for all its charm and community spirit, lacked the security infrastructure that might have provided investigators with a lead. The Harveys themselves offered no obvious motive for murder. Detectives immediately began digging into their finances, looking for hidden debts or gambling problems. They found nothing. Brian's job with the school system was stable. Kathy's toy store was modestly successful. They weren't wealthy, but they weren't drowning in debt either. Investigators interviewed everyone who had been invited to the New Year's Day barbecue, meticulously documenting where each person had been that morning and whether they'd seen anything unusual on their way to the house. They talked to Brian's former bandmates, Kathy's employees at World of Mirth, parents who frequented the toy store, teachers at the girls' schools, neighbors who'd lived on the street for decades. The answer, again and again, was no. The Harveys were beloved. They had no known enemies. No one could think of a single person who would want to harm them, let alone murder an entire family, including 2 young children. Then, on January 6th, 5 days after the murders, the phone rang at Richmond Police Headquarters. The call came in just after 3 in the afternoon, routed to the Detective Division's tip line. On the other end was a woman who identified herself as LaToya Pauley. Her voice was shaking but determined. She told the detective who answered that she needed police to conduct a welfare check on her friend, 21-year-old Ashley Baskerville Tucker. But that wasn't all. She also said she believed she knew who had murdered the Harvey family. The detective sat up straighter. After days of dead ends, this was the first call that sounded genuinely credible. Pauley explained that Ashley's boyfriend was a man named Ray Joseph Dandridge, 29 years old. His uncle, actually a few months younger than Dandridge due to an unusual generational gap in the family, was named Ricky Javon Gray, also 29. Pauley said both men had been staying with Ashley recently, and their behavior over the past several days had become increasingly alarming. She told the detective that Gray and Dandridge had visited her home just a few days earlier, and they'd brought with them a laptop computer. When Pauley saw the laptop sitting on her kitchen table, her blood ran cold. The wallpaper on the screen was a family photo, and she immediately recognized the faces. It was the Harvey family, the same family whose murders had been plastered across every television screen and newspaper in Virginia for the past 5 days. Pauley said she'd asked Gray and Dandridge where they'd gotten the laptop. They'd brushed off her question, made a joke about finding it, and changed the subject. But Pauley wasn't stupid. She knew exactly what she was looking at. That laptop had been stolen from the Harvey home, which meant these 2 men had been inside that house, which meant they were almost certainly responsible for what had happened there. But the laptop wasn't the only reason Pauley was calling. She revealed something even more disturbing. Pauley told investigators that over the past several weeks, Gray, Dandridge, and Ashley had been developing a plan to rob Ashley's own parents, Mary and Percy L. Tucker. The scheme was elaborate and cruel. Ashley would pretend to be a hostage, claiming she'd been kidnapped by Gray and Dandridge. The 2 men would then contact her parents and demand money for her safe return. The brilliance of the plan, from the criminal's perspective, was that Ashley would appear to be an innocent victim. After the ransom was paid and she was released, she could continue living with her parents, maintaining her relationship with them while secretly splitting the stolen money with Gray and Dandridge. Pauley said she'd been invited to participate in the robbery. Ashley had approached her several weeks earlier, explaining the plan and asking if Pauley wanted in on the scheme. Pauley had immediately refused. The whole thing felt wrong. Morally wrong, but also practically dangerous. She didn't trust Gray or Dandridge, and she told Ashley as much. But Ashley had gone through with it anyway. On the evening of January 4th, just 3 days after the Harvey murders, Gray and Dandridge had left Pauley's home with Ashley, saying they were going to handle business with her parents. Several hours later, only Gray and Dandridge returned. They walked into Pauley's home acting casual, almost cheerful. Pauley immediately asked where Ashley was. What had happened? Was she okay? That's when Gray delivered the line that would haunt Pauley and ultimately lead to his arrest. He smiled, actually smiled, and said in a sing-song voice, "Ashley has gone, bye-bye." The phrase was playful, almost childlike, but the way Gray said it, the look in his eyes when the words left his mouth, made Paulie's stomach drop. She knew instantly that Ashley was dead, and she knew that if she didn't get away from these men immediately, she might be next. Paulie told investigators she'd waited until Gray and Dandridge left her home, then she'd locked every door and window. She'd stayed up all night, terrified they would come back, and the next morning, she'd made the call to police. The detective listening to Paulie's story felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the break they'd been desperately waiting for. He kept Paulie on the line, gathering every detail, descriptions of Gray and Dandridge, the vehicle they'd been driving, their last known location, any other evidence they might have left behind. Then he radioed for backup and prepared for the worst. Within 20 minutes, multiple police units were racing toward the home of Mary and Percy L. Tucker. The address was in a modest, working-class neighborhood on the outskirts of Richmond, the kind of place where people worked hard, kept to themselves, and never imagined they'd become part of a murder investigation. Percy L. Tucker, 55 years old, had spent decades working as a forklift operator at a local warehouse. He was known as reliable, quiet, someone who showed up on time and did his job without complaint. Mary Tucker, 46, worked for a housekeeping business, cleaning homes and offices throughout the Richmond area. Like her husband, she was hardworking and unassuming. They had taken their daughter Ashley back into their home recently after noticing troubling signs in her relationship with Ray Dandridge. They'd hoped that living at home again might help Ashley get her life back on track, maybe convince her to leave Dandridge and find someone better. They never imagined that decision would cost them their lives. When officers arrived at the Tucker home, they found the front door locked. They knocked, announced themselves, and received no response. Given the urgency of Paulie's call and the possible connection to the Harvey murders, they made the decision to force entry. What they found inside made even veteran detectives physically ill. The scene was a near-perfect mirror of the Harvey murders. All three victims, Mary, Percy L., and Ashley, had been bound with duct tape. Their hands and feet were secured. Heavy duct tape had been wound around their heads multiple times, covering their mouths and noses, slowly suffocating them. But the killers hadn't stopped there. Each victim's throat had been deeply slashed. Percy L. had a sock that had been forcibly shoved down his throat, likely while he was still alive, causing him to choke even as he bled. Ashley had a plastic bag pulled over her head and secured with more tape, ensuring she couldn't breathe even if the other injuries hadn't killed her. The medical examiner who performed the autopsies would later determine that the official cause of death for all three victims was suffocation and torture. They had died slowly, painfully, completely aware of what was happening to them. But there was one piece of evidence that definitively linked this scene to the Harvey murders, one detail that removed any doubt about who was responsible. Ashley Baskerville Tucker was wearing a man's wedding band on her finger. When investigators examined it more closely, they found an inscription inside, Brian and Kathy's names, along with their wedding date. It was the ring that had been stolen from Catherine Harvey's finger after she was murdered on January 1st. In that moment, investigators understood the full scope of what they were dealing with. These weren't isolated incidents. This wasn't a single family targeted for a specific reason. This was a pair of serial killers who were moving through the Richmond area systematically, leaving behind scenes of unimaginable brutality. 7 people dead in less than a week, 2 entire families wiped out, and somewhere in the city, or possibly already fled to another state, were 2 men who had demonstrated they had absolutely no hesitation about killing again. The manhunt was now officially on, and every second mattered. Law enforcement traced Gray and Dandridge's movements to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. On January 7, 2006, 6 days after the Harvey murders, both men were arrested and transported back to Virginia. In interrogation, Dandridge tried to blame Gray, portraying himself as a reluctant accomplice, too afraid to refuse. But when confronted, Gray admitted everything. He confessed to both family massacres in chilling detail. He explained he'd been high on PCP during the Harvey murders, a drug known to cause violent hallucinations and behavior. What disturbed investigators most wasn't the confession itself. It was Gray's complete lack of emotion. No remorse, no recognition of the devastation he'd caused. He spoke in a flat, monotone voice, staring straight ahead as if describing something on television rather than his own actions. One detective said it felt like sitting across from someone fundamentally missing something essential to being human. On top of that, Gray revealed additional crimes. He admitted murdering his wife, 21-year-old Treva Terrell Gray, whose body had been found in a shallow grave in Washington, Pennsylvania. They'd been married 6 months. He also admitted to brutally attacking 26-year-old Ryan Carey on December 31st, 2005, one day before the Harvey murders. Carey was stabbed and beaten outside his parents' Arlington home, spending 2 weeks in a coma and permanently losing use of his right arm. In total, Gray and Dandridge were responsible for at least 7 murders and 1 near-fatal assault, all within less than 2 weeks. In February 2006, Gray was charged with 5 counts of capital murder. Dandridge was charged with 3 counts of murder. Both pleaded not guilty despite their confessions. Gray's trial began in August 2006. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence: his videotaped confession, forensic evidence, and testimony from survivors. The defense argued Gray suffered diminished capacity due to an abusive childhood and chronic drug abuse. The jury wasn't swayed. On August 28, 2006, Gray was found guilty on all counts. He received life sentences for Brian and Kathy's murders. For Stella and Ruby's deaths, the court imposed the death penalty. Dandridge accepted a plea deal in September 2006 to avoid execution. He received life without parole and remains at Sussex 2 State Prison. Over 9 years, Gray's team filed numerous appeals arguing diminished capacity and an abusive childhood warranted leniency. Every appeal was denied. On January 18, 2017, 11 years after the murders, Ricky Javon Gray was executed by lethal injection at Greensville Correctional Center. He was offered a final statement. He declined. He was pronounced dead at 9:22 in the evening.
Death was pronounced at 9:42 p.m. When asked if he had any final words, Mr. Gray said nope.
Breaking news tonight at 11. Convicted killer Ricky Gray has been executed tonight at the Greensville Correctional Center.
And you just heard the time of death, 9:42 p.m.
Over 1,400 people attended the Harvey family's memorial service at St. Paul's Episcopal Church. The sanctuary overflowed with mourners, friends, strangers, musicians, parents who'd shopped at World of Mirth. Outside Kathy's store, people created a memorial with flowers, stuffed animals, and children's drawings. One little girl left a worn rabbit with a note, "I miss you, Miss Kathy." Outside the house on North Chesterfield Avenue, neighbors kept candles burning for weeks, volunteers maintaining them day and night. Stephen Culp, Kathy's brother, testified during sentencing. Through tears, he said, "It was like a lightning bolt to the heart that felt bottomless. It kills me to think about their last hours. We are all trying to get past this. We owe it to them and to their spirit." Culp spoke about Kathy's vision for World of Mirth, a peaceful, creative space for children. The store remains open today, honoring that vision. In 2007, Richmond dedicated a memorial in Forest Hill Park, where the Harveys spent countless afternoons together. A granite monument stands at the entrance to a footbridge. A bronze plaque shows the family's smiling faces. Brian with his guitar, Kathy with her arms around both girls, Stella and Ruby grinning at the camera. The inscription reads, "In loving memory of the Harvey family, may their light continue to shine." Every January 1st, the community gathers at the memorial to light candles, share stories, and remember. The Harvey family murders were a stark reminder of how fragile safety can be and how quickly violence can shatter lives built on love and creativity. Brian, Kathy, Stella, and Ruby deserved more time. They deserved to see Stella graduate, to watch Ruby start school, to host 100 more New Year's parties. Instead, their story ended in a basement playroom at the hands of two men who saw them only as obstacles to theft. But their memory endures. In the toy store still serving families in Carytown, in Brian's music that still moves people, in neighbors who light candles every January 1st, and in the monument reminding everyone, these were real people, with real lives, stolen too soon. If you like the way we create these videos, and you want to help bring more cases like this to light, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives. Thank you once again for watching.